answering your scuba diving questions every single week. Welcome to Scuba Diving Magazine and welcome to Ask Mark, which is a scuba diving Q&A. If you have any scuba diving questions, pop them down in the comments below and use the Ask Mark hashtag to get featured in an upcoming Q&A. This week I'm answering questions from you guys about custom mouthpieces and whether you can use them for donating regulators, the little regulator bolt snaps that some divers have on their primaries and what they're for, instructor BCDs and what BCD you should wear as an instructor, equipment storage because it's starting to get chilly up here in the northern hemisphere, so what's the best way to store your equipment, and side mount setups and the different ways that you can attach cylinders to yourself. Let's dive straight in with the first question, which this week comes from Chris Whitpan, and they say, you get a lot of questions about long hoses and I would like to change my setup. Is this something you can do safely when using a custom mouthpiece like a Secure? Thanks for all the great vids. And a follow-up question, what is the Boltsnap by the second stage for hashtag Boltsnaps everywhere? Yes, hashtag Boltsnaps everywhere. Okay, so yes, if you're transitioning to a long hose primary donate, but you use one of those mouthpieces that is like reshaped to your mouth, you a lot of them you dip them in hot water, so the I don't know, rubber, plastic, whatever it's made out of, becomes like malleable. You then put it in your mouth and it molds to the shape of your jaw. Can you use that for a primary donate? Yes, because if you've just run out of air and you go up to your buddy and they hand you a second stage, whatever's on the mouthpiece side of it is going in your mouth because you just want that air. Unless you have a really weird mouth, chances are someone else will be able to breathe from it. It may not be the most comfortable, but you can hold it in place. In fact, that's actually how you're taught to receive a donated long hose primary. You hold on to it just so that, yeah, if they turn a corner or they do something weird, it doesn't yank them second stage out of your mouth, because then you have to try and catch it. So yeah, well, I was taught to always hold on to it. And yeah, that way you don't have to bite down on the mouthpiece sort of quite as much. So it is not so much of an issue. I wouldn't worry too much about it. I would notify my buddy, obviously, just so that they can just take a look at it. But yeah, chances are if you're donating gas in just a non-overhead environment, you're heading straight up to the surface anyway, so you're not going to be breathing from it too long. The mouthpiece doesn't have to be overly comfortable for the victim diver, as it were. So no, I wouldn't worry too much about that. And the second question, what's the little bolt snap for? So yeah, you'll find on a lot of longer hoses a little bolt snap right next to a second stage. That's if you're diving with multiple gases, and it's basically, it's useful to clip that second stage onto a D-ring. It's usually your right hand shoulder, the D-ring, when you're not using that. So if you're diving with multiple second stages and you're swapping backwards and forwards, instead of having this long hose just kind of dangle, and potentially if you're doing something, kind of swing around and disappear, and then you got 2 meters of hose with a fairly expensive second stage on the end of it. No, so you clip it off, and that way it stays where you want it, and when you need it, it's exactly where you expect it to be. So that's for clipping it off when it's not in your mouth. It's quite useful, and also for traveling as well. It's quite handy to have a bolt snap so you can clip it off to something, so that the entire hose doesn't get a bit too unrowdy, and yeah, your second stage ends up just falling or doing whatever. So it's for keeping that second stage in the right place when it's not in your mouth. For most of the dive, if you're just diving on like twins or something, it just stays in your mouth, and then it's mainly for like storage and like getting out of the water. You kind of clip it off so it's not dangling sort of out of the way. But if you're diving with multiple gases, that one comes out, you transition onto to another second stage, and then you clip that off so that that second stage is attached and you know where it is. Hearty M Mufti says, hi Mark, hope that you're in the best of health. Yes, but my other half is very heavily pregnant at the moment, but I'm perfectly fine. I'm in good health. Thank you for all your videos on how to make a long hose regulator. You're welcome. I'm looking to buy a new BCD and want your advice and thoughts. As a diving instructor, I'm looking for something that can stand the test of time. One thing that I can use for training and teaching and every day-to-day dive. I have 3 BCDs in mind: the Hollis HD200, the Poseidon 1 harness and wing, the Apex WTX harness with WTX D30 wing. Please advise any thoughts and ideas. Yeah, so the 3 BCDs, the one that I would naturally go for is the backplane harness, as most people I'm sure are very unsurprised. Hollis HD200 and the Poseidon 1. So HD200 is more it's verging on, like, it looks like technical diving, but it's still a recreational wing, just made by a more technical brand. But tough materials and a wing style. They went, I think it's still a horseshoe wing for some reason. That's very old-fashioned. So that would kind of put me off that one, because if something breaks and it's not very customizable, so that would be your wing style BCD, and then that's it. For single cylinders, might be able to take twins, but it's more designed for singles. But yeah, if something breaks, then you just have to get a new BCD. I think with the HD200 you can swap the bladder out, but if a strap or a buckle breaks or something, most of those are sewn in place, so it's a bit too much hassle. Poseidon 1. So that's moving more into the realms of tech, and that has lots of padding. It does have adjustability, but there's a lot of like hardware, which I'm not a huge fan of. So each D-ring, you have to bolt them into place. You do have lots of control, a fair amount of control of where it sits on your shoulders and the different bits and bobs, but it's still kind of limits you. You do have a separate wing, so you can sort of change the buoyancy on it, but for like full longevity, future proofing, you can't go far wrong with a WTX backplate and a D30, because then if you wanted to add integrated weights, you just add them on. If you don't want them at all, you can sort of swap that out. If you want a heavyweight BCD, then you have your stainless steel backplate. If you want something lighter, you got the aluminium. You can pick and choose the harness, whether it's just the simple one-piece harness that a lot of more advanced divers prefer, just because it's just failure proof, and you can pick and choose exactly where and how many D-rings and what's attached onto you. If you then choose to dive on twins or something, then you can just change that D30 for a 45, I think, or a 40T, I think the newest one is. So that really future-proofs yourself. They all have, all you really need as an instructor is an inflator hose coming over your left-hand shoulder, so that they can like recognize and see, so that when you need to sort of point, that you need to inflate your BCD, they know what you're pointing at, instead of one of those like i3 or air trim kind of systems. So out of those 3 personally to teach with and to just dive with, I'd be diving with the D30, just because it's the most customizable and future-proof. Clean Aero says, "Hey Mark, we're relatively new in scuba diving and actually don't really know how to store our gear. Can you give us any advice how to properly store and dry it, dry suit, regulators, etc. at home? Is it better to store it in the garage, or shall we store it in the cellar for temperature reasons? And are there any special tools and furniture to store the gear in safe way so that it won't get damaged? Best regards from Austria." Yeah, so with regulators, I usually say treat them a bit like bread, in a cool, dark place, which is nice and dry and not for too long, so they don't go stale. So with regulators, I've just finished, literally just finished how to like store your regulators for the winter time. So chances are that video might already be live. But for that, clean it, give it a good scrub. Don't disassemble it. But the one thing that you can do to really help your regulator is to unscrew any breathing adjustments knob that you might have, because the way they work is there's a spring on the inside of here that's pushing a sealing surface against a seal, and the more that spring is kind of pushing it in, it ends up bedding in. So that means the next time you go to use your regulator, some air can kind of creep around that seal and you just get some bubbles coming out of your second stage. And realistically, they need a service. You just need to swap that seal out. But if you unscrew this as much as possible without like using tools or anything, just using your hands, that helps to alleviate some of that pressure. In the past, I've also rigged up something that holds down the purge button, because that does effectively the same thing. So that, and pop that in the regulator bag. And yeah, you want somewhere that's just warm, nowhere that the frost or anything is going to get to it, nowhere that's I mean, not like in an airing cupboard or something that's going to get really hot from water boilers or anything. You just want them in just a nice temperate climate, and not humid or dirty and wet. Make sure they get a good clean and a good dry, and then yeah, they're pretty good to store. But any longer than 5-6 months or something, then they'll need a service anyway, because the O-rings and all the moving parts, they need to move to stay in good condition, and grease will harden, the O-rings will harden and crack. So if they're not being used, then they tend to kind of seize up a little bit. So it's best to either use them maybe once a month if there's a local diving club, just get them in a swimming pool, if anything, just to get those breathing repetitions going through. But if it's been 5-6 months, just book them in for a service a good month or so before your next dive trip. As far as wetsuits and dry suits, yeah, give them a good clean. Dry suits do have specific hangers. There's two options. You either get ones that have like 3 prongs, and you put the boot through those so that your dry suit hangs upside down, so that anything inside of the dry suit goes downwards. So if there's any moisture in it, it's naturally going to hopefully find its way downwards. But you also find really broad shouldered coat hangers. If you look up something like Hang Air has a little fan propeller in the top, and that's hanging it up like a traditional coat, as it were, as a coat hanger would do, but it's actually blowing just air into it, so it airs it out. So that's a bit nicer. And then for long-term storage, I quite like to hang up my dry suit. It's behind the camera, just so that it's not, I mean, that's a membrane dry suit, so there's not too much sort of weight or strain on sort of any one particular part. Sorry, all these things keep coming into mind. So yeah, I usually hang it up just the right way up, and that way air can kind of circulate again in a temperate climate. So I'd keep it indoors instead of like a garden shed or something, especially neoprene dry suits. I've heard stories of like someone comes to their dry suit in the spring period and the mice had gotten to it because they love neoprene. It's a good insulator, so they chewed up their wetsuit or neoprene dry suit, I forget. The seals you do need to be quite careful of. So latex especially, give them a dusting on the inside and the outside with a non-perfumed talc, because latex, when it touches itself, it kind of melts and it goes funny. So you need to sort of give it a non-perfume, because the perfumes, or some perfumes for just like normal like talcum powder, can be quite like an accelerant to, not an accelerant in that way, but it makes them degrade faster. So give them a quick dusting, not too much, just enough to give it a good powdering, and check your seals as well. Mainly the dump valve, because on the inside, if you tend to use a lot of talc, the talc can like clog up that valve, so you can just unscrew them. They do have a tool. It'll be something like that, which often comes with dry suits. If not, you can buy these as a separate item, and they just sort of wrap around the valve, and you've got these little notches that they sort of lock into, so you can loosen it and then sort of re-tighten it up. But yeah, all you're really looking at is in here, kind of look for any like talcum powder, any buildup of anything. So there is a filter, but sometimes it manages to get through, especially if you use a lot of talcum powder. So just make sure that's nice and clean. Try and avoid folding. I'm not a huge fan of folding, especially dry suits, because the zipper can get damaged quite easily, and you create a like a pressure point on a certain point of the fabric that can create a hole. So yeah, I just like to sort of hang them up. Sue S says, on the topic of side mount, here in the southern region of the United States, we do a Mexico setup and a Florida setup. Main difference being that Florida utilizes bolt snaps on a leash as opposed to bungees. Any different styles in your region? I mean, full disclosure, I'm not the best to ask about side mount. It's been a long time since I've done any like proper dual mounted side mount, just because here I tend to wear a lot of gloves and it's a lot of clipping. I just prefer twins. I was taught to have, I don't think I've got any knocking around. So we were taught, yeah, we had a single bungee that ran from the D-rings all the way around, and that was a single piece, because you can have two sets of bungee, and then we had a little leash, and that went around the neck of the cylinder, and that would clip off to the D-ring as well, and then you tuck that bungee over the little extra section. Come here. That would just hook over that to really like pull that in and hold it nice and close. So I presume that's Mexico style. I don't really know. As I said, I'm not a huge side mount diver anymore. It is quite tough with all the extra dry suits and stuff. So I just stick with my twin set. But yeah, that's how I was taught. I don't know. I mean, I was taught the year that it suddenly became a real big thing in like recreational diving, and everyone was learning how to side mount dive. I signed up for a course with one of the reps for Hollis, and yeah, sort of did that course. That was good fun. Yeah, that's how I was taught. I honestly don't know the current like popular way that most divers do it. I assume that's the same way. They may have changed it. I know the shape and the style of side mount BCDs has certainly changed since I first learned, but yeah, that's how I was taught. And that's it for another week. So interesting questions. If you've got any questions, please put them down in the comments below. If you've got more information about side mount diving and the way that side mount divers do it nowadays, please let us know down in the comments below. I'd be quite interesting to learn, because I really haven't looked into it that much recently, to be honest. But yeah, if you do have any questions, pop them down in the comments below. Use that AskMark hashtag, and YouTube just filters it to one side so that I can find it. Remember to like, share, subscribe, do all that social media stuff. Head over to the website scubadivingmag.com. Check out the website. Check out all our other social media platforms. Yeah, thanks for watching, and of course, safe diving.